70 years changed the trajectory of our family's history. Ken and Kathy, our grandparents, chose family, Jesus Christ, hard work, loyalty, grit, and perseverance. Those choices have given me and each one of their kids, grandkids and great-grandkids, opportunities we couldn't have imagined if our grandparents hadn't had the courage and strength to cling to each other and their shared faith to reshape their future and ours. It takes an extraordinary person to do that. And so today, despite our grief and the knowledge that we will miss her every day, we are here to celebrate, which we know is what Grandma would have wanted. What kind of person are we celebrating today? A woman who wasn't afraid of anything. Conflict, to share her opinion, monsters in the dark, rich people, poor people, cancer, or even death. She was fierce, loyal, generous, and loving. She embodied grace. Her arms and home were always open, and there was always a pot of coffee. She made us feel safe, confident, and proud.
Catherine Ivy Hensler was many things to many people. To most, she was a friend, and to some, she was a mentor. To most, to a lucky few, she was a mother, and to one blessed man, she was a wife for 70 years. To many fortunate souls, like myself, she was a grandmother. My grandma was a remarkable woman of great beauty and brilliance. Her dazzling eyes could disarm you. Held in her gaze, you would be easily charmed. While in her good graces, but crossed the line and that same beautiful stare could level you. A woman of faith, which saved her from a childhood filled with adversity. She had a rare grace and kindness in spades. She was a remarkably brilliant woman who loved peace, Christ, and family. She was the matriarch who taught each of her 5 children and countless grandchildren and great-grandchildren fierce loyalty.
My grandmother had that rare kind of toughness that manifests feeling joy and celebrating being alive. Not many people will continue snowboarding into their 80s. Not many people will beat cancer. Not many people will beat cancer and then keep snowboarding into their 90s. But that was Kathy Hensler. If you saw her, she was doing something she loved. She was painting, or she was reading something new she found interesting, or she was preparing to have family over. Any of the challenges life threw at her, she dealt with them and moved past them. She had a life to live after all. She loved her family, she loved people being together. It's telling that the home she made in Tehachapi with my grandfather, and later the home in Bishop, was the sort of place you had to stop by. You happened to be anywhere near. Any day of the week, any time of the year, you could come by and you'd be welcome. You'd also be all but guaranteed to run into some member of the family. We didn't always realize it at the time, but that sort of thing isn't really all that common. To have a home that's a perpetual gathering place like that, especially not for 4 generations of family. But it all comes from Kathy's love of family and her generosity of spirit.
My grandma nurtured an ample amount of healthy respect among all of those who knew her, but more than respect, she nurtured our spirits, raising us each to know her great love, and the love of our Savior. To be in my grandma's good graces was to feel the warmth of Christ himself, as her presence brought healing like the afternoon sun on a warm spring day. She brought with her the hope of better things to come and whisperings of the deeper things of the Spirit. I often remember the rich, warm aroma of coffee and the calming feel of the sunlight as it poured through the windows in her dining room. warming my hair and cheeks, my grandma's angelic smile and crystal blue eyes shining at me across the top of the table, as I cast my cares and worries at her feet. She listened intently without ever interrupting every single time. When I was done, she would reach over, placing a warm hand on my forearm, assuring me that everything in life is in God's plan, and so are you, Shell, she would say. She had a way of soothing the soul of those around her and bringing peace to the hearts of so many. Grandma also taught us to have deep love for the life we were given and to take things in stride. I'll always remember the day me and Gwen were at Grandma's house while she made a cheesecake for my birthday party like she did every year. The cake, which she made from scratch, would take many hours to complete, so while Grandma cooked, me and Gwen cleaned the house. After a long day, we had just finished polishing the kitchen floor when the other timer went off and Grandma pulled the cake out. As she stepped away from the hot oven, the large cake tipped and slid out of her hands. It fell all over the floor and splattered as Grandma yelled, "Fiddlesticks!" Only if you know her, it was not fiddlesticks. There was a pregnant pause, very big, pregnant silent pause, as Gwen and I exchanged nervous glances, not knowing what was going to come next. Then, slowly, a smile spread across Grandma's face, and she gave off one of her sly, "Huh." And then she turned and walked across the kitchen saying, "Well, there's only one thing we can do here." She opened up the kitchen drawer and pulled out 3 forks. We sat for the next hour giggling and eating the warm cake off her sparkling forks. Oh, I thought it was Spencer next. Yeah, you gotta do the transition. Hold on. To know my grandma was to love her, and no one knew Grandma better than her husband, Ed. In so many ways, they grew up together, having met when they were just 19 and 17. It's so rare to see 2 people love each other more than Ken and Kathy did, and the depth of that love and fierce emotion often translated into a little bit of friction.
If we had a little more time, we would have choreographed the switches, with some dance moves or something.
Yeah.
When Grandma and Grandpa were first married, Grandma got upset about something that Grandpa said or did. He doesn't remember what it was. Infuriated, Grandma kicked the front door as hard as she could. She kicked it so hard, in fact, that Grandpa thought she might have broken a toe. He had never seen a person lose their temper like that. In his house, growing up, no one ever got loud or argued. So when he saw what she did, he thought it was hilarious and began to laugh. Seeing Grandpa's reaction, my grandma got even madder and kicked the door again even harder. Grandpa literally fell down laughing, and she stormed out, limping towards the laundry room. He yelled, "Where are you going?" She yelled back, "I'm going to call my dad and have him come and get me." Well, I think they were in Washington State or Chicago at this point, and her dad was in California, so that would have been a pretty big thing. I'm sure he would have done it, but Grandpa managed to talk Grandma out of the call. But that early incident taught him that any minute, Grandma's fiery inferno might erupt again. Yes, Grandma could be fierce. And what I remember about her ferocity is how she used it to make me feel safe, loved, and protected. When I was younger, I had terrible nightmares, which made me hate going to bed. Once, after Graham put me in bed, I got back up. To be fair, it was probably every time that she or anyone else put me to bed, I got back up. But this one time, I remember, it wasn't my fear of missing out or a need for one more glass of water. This time, I couldn't sleep because there were monsters in my room. Instead of getting impatient and frustrated, or trying to tell me that there wasn't anything to be afraid of, Grandma accepted my fear and the monsters as real and told me she'd take care of it. She marched down the hall, leaving me standing there, shut my bedroom door behind her as she stormed in. Right away, I heard the noise of rough and tumble brawl, screaming and yelling, cursing and shouting, beating on things. I mean, it was like a full-on fight in my bedroom. And then it was quiet. When she came out, she told me she kicked their butts. And she told them never to come back or to mess with her Andy again. I slept great that night. And knowing that I had a grandma that could stand toe-to-toe with my nightmares and kick their butts gave me such confidence. How many of you have similar stories? Stories about how grandma gave you a reason to hold your head up, a sense of warmth and protection against the evil of the world, trying to be against it, a flesh and blood glimpse of what Jesus would do if he was here.
We should also remember how funny she was. You know, as an aside, she loved dolls. You've all seen the dolls. And that's because when she was little, she never had a doll of her own, so later on in life, when she was able to, that became her thing. You know, you've seen the ceramic dolls she made. They're beautiful, they're intricate, finely detailed. Just a ton of artistry, care, and love that she puts into it. Most of you might also remember that doll studio she had at the house in Tehachapi. And for a while, that doll studio was like a guest house of sorts. I stayed there the summer after my freshman year of college, and in truth, you know, those dolls are creepy. See the entire room of their limbs, their parts not yet assembled, and you're trying to sleep. It's disconcerting. So I was staying in that dollhouse, and I guess I got a little too comfortable. One day I thought I was by myself, and I was singing along to the radio pretty loudly. Here's the Rolling Stones song, Beast of Burden. I didn't realize she was in there around the corner working on her dolls where I couldn't see her. And she waited till I got to the line, all I want is you to make love to me. And then nice and loud from around the corner called out, I would, dear, but I'm too old for that kind of thing. Turns out that's the most effective way you can let a 19-year-old know just whose dollhouse it's in. I'm sure we can all remember how quick her wit was. Anytime you got into a spirited conversation with her, she'd give as good as she got, and didn't mind taking you down to bed if you needed. But she was also incredibly sentimental. When my family first moved to Tehachapi when I was in 3rd grade, our whole class made some kind of arts and crafts project around Christmas time. I remember, at the time there wasn't much to be. I just stuck a bunch of clothes into an orange, because it was supposed to be a potpourri ball or something like that. But I got it home, or I brought it home, and I gave it to her. And that thing stayed hanging up in that kitchen for at least 20 years, possibly longer. And the reason was it was a gift to her from one of her grandkids. And because of that, she held on to it well past the point most of us would have thrown it out. But she loved all of her family, and she loved anything that reminded her of them. There are countless stories and cherished memories that Captain Ivy Hensler leaves with us collectively, and so her memory will live on in the legends we recount. Truly, we are the most fortunate among men and women to have had someone with such grace, humor, compassion, ferocity, loyalty, and faith to guide us along the way.
Like a breath, she came and went from this life. And though the world is better for having known her, those who know her best will never be able to recover this loss. The only bright spot in her absence is knowing the joy she must have experienced as the heavens shouted out in celebration upon her arrival. For if ever God had a favorite, surely she was his.